We are live. We are live. Welcome to College Football's Peek Around the Corner with your host, Greg Flugar. We cover everything in college football because we love everything in college football. And if you do as well, please subscribe to our ever-growing channel. Smash the like button if you like our content. Share the video with your family and friends if you want to support this channel through a generous donation. Just hit the $sign when you make a comment. Your super chat, we'll get to it as quick as possible. Welcome into the studio that sits on the corner, that sits on the very corner of Keith Jackson Parkway in Kurt Gowdy Avenue. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to be a PATC legend with your phone calls in the chat room. Holy smokes, I've been off for 2 days. We haven't done a live I'm kind of fired up. I am a little bit more than fired up as we start our show this Friday, February 2nd. We were going to do this at 5 o'clock Eastern, but we decided to move it up. We've been working on, as you see the title of the show, it's the hidden agenda in regards to the Power 2 Advisory Group. I'm going to go through a couple articles real quick. I'm going to go through some posts on X. We're going to be talking about this issue. No, it's not about a breakaway. Not at this time. Maybe years from now, possibly, maybe. but not at this time. But this is about something more than what is being described in the article. Yes, there's a lot of issues to solve. Yes, I believe this is about tightening the circle. But first of all, let me just get to maybe people don't know what I'm talking about to begin with. So let's start off with the breaking news. Big Ten Conference puts out a post. Big Ten Conference, Southeastern Conference form an advisory group. The SEC also puts out on their account news. SEC and the Big Ten announced the formation of a joint advisory group of university presidents, chancellors, and ADs to address significant challenges facing college athletics, opportunities for the betterment of the student athlete. Pete Thamel, ESPN, puts out a post. Sources: the SEC and the Big Ten are set to announce that they're setting up an advisory committee. It's expected to look at the entire college sports landscape and solutions within it. Brett McMurphy puts out a tweet. Now, this is a real alliance. The Big Ten and SEC have formed a joint advisory group of university presidents, chancellors, and ADs to address the significant challenges facing college athletics and the opportunities for betterment of the student-athlete experience. The SEC and the Big Ten put out a joint comment. The Big Ten and the SEC have substantial investment in the NCAA. And there's no question that the voices of our two conferences are integral to the governance and other reform efforts, said Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti. We recognize the similarity in our circumstances, as well as the urgency to address the common challenges we face. There are similar cultural and social impacts on our student athletes, our institutions, and our communities because of the new collegiate athletic environment, said SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey. We do not have predetermined answers to the myriad questions facing us. We do not expect to agree on everything, but enhancing interaction between our conferences will help to focus efforts on our common sense solutions. We're going to get more into it. We're going to go through a couple articles real quick. But that is the breaking news, the big news of today. SEC, the Big Ten, going to form an advisory group. As we go through these couple articles, and we're going to go through them quick, we don't know the composition of this advisory group. We don't know how many athletic directors, presidents, chancellors are from each conference are going to be in this advisory group. It sounds like Petitti and Sankey are going to be part of it. That's basically all we know. And they're not going to have too much authority to change things within the autonomous four-conference structure as we see it now. I believe. Now, we're going to get to the real big story that I'm going to break here at PATC. But what I truly believe this, and again, before we get to the article, I have made it very clear at PATC for the last 17 months. I've made it clear when we say power to, what we are saying. A lot of people use power to out there in every which way, and they keep moving the goalposts on what they mean. We don't. Power to is the SEC and the Big Ten. They have more power. They have more influence. They just do. And that power and influence has grown. But we're not using the term power to as those two conferences are going to break away. That they're going to cut off playoff access to the ACC, the Big 12, or the G5 conferences. We don't believe that. If that does happen, that's going to happen years from now, a result of whatever happens in the next 6 to 7 years. But it's not happening now. And again, in this article, Greg Sankey, they're making it perfectly clear that they're not interested in that. Greg Sankey, to be honest, let's be honest. I'm going to be honest here, peek around the corner. Because this doesn't get written in college football national articles out there. But Greg Sankey is not a reformer. He's not. He's been dragging his feet the whole time. Tony Petitti, a new commissioner, right? Doesn't have the pull. He's been talking, getting a good relationship built with Greg Sankey. Kevin Warren didn't like to talk to anybody, did not like to build consensus. But Greg Sankey has not been the great reformer that this college football landscape has needed. He has not. He's not. Now suddenly, okay, we need to make some changes. Now we need to work together. Now maybe we need direct compensation from the conferences or school to the student athletes. Now we need to get it more professionalized. And Sankey has been against all of that. So interesting. Now, we're going to get to it at the end of the monologue. So let me make it perfectly clear. Power 2 is not about a breakaway. Not at this time. And maybe not ever. The Power 2 is what it's always been. The two conferences holding the most power, the most influence. Maybe not the most votes, but if you combine, but they have the most power and influence, okay? Now, we believe here at Peek Around the Corner, there is a hidden cloak and dagger agenda to what the Big Ten and the SEC is trying to do. And I'm going to give it to you straight here at Peek Around the Corner. I don't believe you've read this in any article. No one's talked about this that I know of. But I'm going to give it to you straight. There is a hidden agenda. Besides trying to fix a whole bunch of problems, trying to tighten the circle to help build consensus, right? To help build consensus so then they can go to the Big 12, the ACC, invite them into the advisory group once things have been established. But besides all of that, it isn't all altruistic. There is something that the Big Ten and the SEC are going to try to do. I had a very bountiful conversation after this news broke out, and it's not about the playoffs. It's something else that's going on between the Big Ten and the SEC, and we're going to talk about it at the end of the monologue. So buckle up. Before we get into the article and when I go into the hidden motivation, I just want to thank everybody who's come on in at the beginning of the show. Struthers is in the house. Mr. Monkey says AMAC. Bruce Harris down in Kansas. Patrick Baylor. Mr. Vance, the NCAA is nearing the end. Christopher Stanley. Randy Taylor. Hagen. Nathan Campbell's in the house. Donnie McNerney, early peak member. Rock and Rant, early peak member. Richard L., early peak member. Jay Chapman is in the house. Sean is in the house. Early peak member. Nick Kelso is in the house. Mr. Buckeye is in the house. Divide the states? Nope. That's not what we were told either. There's something else going on between those two conferences. DF Ox is in the house. Ryan is in the house. Thank you for all coming in. I appreciate it. Appreciate it so very much. Let's get to I got to fill up my Cloak and Dagger mug. There is some Cloak and Dagger going on here. There is some Cloak and Dagger going on here. We believe, anyways. We have good reasons to believe. The Athletic comes out with an article talking about today's events. The SEC and the Big Ten to form joint advisory group. What could alliance mean for college sports? Nicole Auerbach. The two most powerful conferences in college athletics are teaming up to tackle the biggest issues facing the enterprise. The Big Ten and the SEC announced on Friday the formation of a joint advisory group that will be made up of university presidents and athletic directors. It will discuss recent court decisions, pending litigation, governor's proposal, and state laws. It's going to talk about something else as well. The goal, the league said, is to take a leadership role in developing solutions for a sustainable future of college sports. The announcement essentially formalizes a collaboration relationship between the two leagues that has been growing ever since Commissioner Tony Petitti took over the Big Ten last year. Petitti and SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey's leagues will represent 34 of the 134 FBS schools at the start of the 2024 football season. The advisory group will engage with other constituencies as necessary. In other words, Big 12, ACC, we'll get to that in a moment, appoint a note considering the frustration many administrators in both leagues have expressed with the NCAA and its typically slow and reactive nature. However, Friday's announcement was not meant to be construed as the first step of a breakaway from the NCAA. That's the very first thing I put out. The very first post I put out on X was this was not about a breakaway. So, not now. Not yet. Maybe not ever. So much of what these leagues do is tied to the national governing body and its services. They're going to have to, if they break away from the NCAA, they're going to have to create another governing body. Okay? Because there's a lot of work that gets done behind the scenes. The Big Ten and the SEC have substantial investment in NCAA. And there's no question that the voices of our two conferences are integral to the governance and other reform efforts, Petitti said in a statement. We recognize the similarity in our circumstances, as well as the urgency to address the common challenges we face. The two conferences are the richest leagues in the country and deal with NIL and other issues at a level different from their peers. Sankey has long complained that the NCAA governors across too diverse a membership, with the schools in the highest resource leagues needing to make more decisions for themselves. We do not have a predetermined answers to the myriad questions facing us, Sankey said in a statement. We do not expect to agree on everything, but an enhancing interaction between our conferences will help to focus efforts on common sense solutions. Illinois Athletic Director Josh Whitman told The Athletic last summer that he believed the Big Ten and the SEC collaboration would be transformative. Again, they're not quite pointing to the hidden motivation that we're going to get to here at the end of the monologue. So stay with us, buckle up, brace for impact. Some circles and some topics. I think that's a necessity, Whitman said. In this cluttered landscape of college athletics, with all the bureaucracy, with all the competing interests, with all the different areas that have proven very unwieldy to try and navigate, if our two conferences lock arms on some of these bigger issues, I think that might be the push that's necessary to actually get some meaningful change created. Friday's announcement was reminiscent of the ill-fated alliance, the collaborated efforts between the Big Ten, Pac-12, ACC that began in the summer of 2021. That was another formal but informal arrangement announced at the height of that summer's realignment tension, which led to joint efforts around mental health awareness and other timely topics. But it fell apart when the Big Ten took two Pac-12 schools in the next year's round of realignment. And finally, in this article, this partnership is less likely to be impacted by the poaching of schools, as the two leagues meet together as equals. The most powerful conference in college athletics, staring down an uncertain future together. Many within college sports believe Sankey and Petitti need to lead the enterprise toward a long-term solution on the issue of athlete compensation. This is the PATC money shot of the article. I'm going to repeat that again. Many within college sports believe Sankey and Petitti need to lead the enterprise toward a long-term solution on the issue of athlete compensation. A topic NCAA President Charlie Baker raised for national-wide conversation with his Project D1 proposal in December. I'm not going, that's all the part that I'm going through in this article. We do provide a link in the description if you want to read the whole article, The Athletic, from Nicole Arbach. Many within college sports believe Sankey and Petitti need to lead the enterprise toward a long-term solution on the issue of athlete compensation. And that is where I am going to turn to right now. So, there's a lot of issues, right? A lot of issues. Transfer portal, NIL, are they going to take it in school? Is there still going to be third parties? There is a whole bunch of issues across the college football landscape. And the Big Ten and the SEC are going to try to build some consensus between the two. They've tightened the circle, less voices. They want to talk to see if they can hammer out some issues and then bring in the Big 12, the ACC, see if they can build consensus on a whole host of these issues. Truthfully, that's what they're trying to do. This is not about a breakaway. Not at this point in time, and we don't believe that point in time is going to happen for many years down the road, if it happens at all. But it's not happening now. Maybe a breakaway from the NCAA, but not a breakaway from the Big 12, whatever remains of the ACC. And we don't even think it's a breakaway from the G5 in 2026. But we'll find out. We'll find out shortly, I believe, on that issue. There is another hidden agenda between the Big Ten and the SEC. You can take this information however you want it. It's about athlete compensation. We were told in a very bountiful conversation that within the Big Ten, within the SEC, they can't even build consensus amongst these two large conferences. These conferences are trying to figure out a compensation model that not only, most importantly, get them out of, help them out. They're going to have to pay some big old money on this, but to be part of the solution when it comes to future lawsuits, to protect themselves when it comes to House versus NCAA, this can be part of the solution. Plus, they're going to have to pay a whole bunch of money. But it's the compensation model that these conferences want to nail down between the both of them. Be patient with me here. Be patient. At the end, this is going to make sense. If it doesn't, I did not do my job correctly. So, there are schools within the Big Ten who have similar reservations about certain compensation models that are the same with some schools in the SEC, and some Big Ten schools agree with some SEC schools. And those two conferences are trying to satisfy all the interests within those two conferences before they even get to the Big 12 and the ACC and everything else. So this is what they're trying to accomplish. But they need to sit down, they need to talk with each other, they need to form relationships. They're trying to figure this out. What the Big Ten needs to do when it comes to the compensation model, besides the National Relations Labor Board, besides the House versus NCAA, besides everything on the outside, I'm talking about in the inside, the Big Ten has to satisfy the interest of the Ohio State Buckeyes, of the Michigan Wolverines, of the Penn State Nittany Lions, of the USC Trojans. They also have to pay attention to the interest of the Indiana, of Purdue, Maryland, Rutgers, Minnesota, and others. The SEC has the same issue. They need to serve the interest of Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and then serve the interests of schools that might be on the bottom end of the revenue rung of the ladder. So this is what the thought is going into this. You got two buckets of revenue. You got the NIL, and you have where the conferences or schools, but it's, at this point we're just going to say conferences, where the conferences are going to have direct compensation to the student athletes. Two buckets of revenue. The thought is, from the Big Ten and the SEC, they've got to figure this out, because this is going to be presented in the House and NCAA case. This has got to be figured out. They do not, the Charlie Baker proposal isn't good enough for the Big Ten and the SEC. In other words, some of this is going to sound realpolitik. This is going to sound kind of, I don't know how to put it. So I'm just going to shoot it to you straight. The SEC and the Big Ten want to take advantage of their wealth. They want to take advantage of their wealth. So they're going to determine, without crushing each other, they want to determine what is it, a percentage, a certain number, what is it that their conferences are going to be paying their student athletes, and in what sports. Now, a lot of this isn't going to be figured out before this all breaks up, this advisory group. But they want to make sure that they set the bar for those two conferences on how much of that media money gets driven to the student athletes. You see, it's going to be higher than the Big 12 and the ACC. And obviously, it's going to be higher than a Washington State and an Oregon State. Obviously, it's going to be higher than the G5 conferences and schools. They want to determine in this compensation model, they want to determine a money that goes to each student athlete in each school for each sport. That satisfies the interest of half of the Big Ten schools and half of the SEC schools. But NIL is where the differentials come in for each school. They want to bring NIL in-house. They want to buy the exclusive name, image, and likeness for most of their athletes, have them sign a contract. Again, so much to work out here. But this is what they're thinking. Bring them in-house. Now, this is where Ohio State, USC, Penn State, Michigan, this is where Iowa is going to give their student athletes a whole lot more money than a Minnesota. The NIL part of this packet, what's going to happen, is what's going to give Alabama the ability to pay their student athletes a whole lot more money than Mississippi State. But for Mississippi State, they want, and a whole bunch of schools, half the SEC, half the Big Ten, they want that media money, that compensation to the student athletes. They want that media money to be high enough to drop it into each and every school, same rate for every football player and basketball player. So a Mississippi State can use their advantage over a Wake Forest, over a Syracuse. And Indiana can use their money advantage over an Iowa State, over an Oklahoma State, when it comes to the media money coming in to their pockets. It's the compensation model that they want to hammer out. They don't want to knife each other. There's a long ways to go on this. Now, example. Of Florida State, let's just take Florida State. They're still going to be able to, even in today's landscape, a Florida State is going to be able to match payment because, they have enough money, they have enough donors, they have enough interest, right? Where they can match up with the middle of the SEC schools, with the middle of the Big Ten. Now, they're not interested in just matching up with the middle. They want to compete for the national championship. That's why they're trying to get out of the ACC. That's why Clemson is. That's why North Carolina is going to be. That's why USC called the Big Ten. This is why Texas and Oklahoma called the SEC. Because this was all eventually going to happen. So there are going to be a few schools out there. If there's no other realignment movement, and there's going to be. But just for sake of discussion, there's going to be some schools that are going to be able to match the compensation packages for these student athletes for the middle of these Big Ten, SEC schools that are outside of the two conferences. But they're not going to be able to match the higher echelon schools, obviously, because the ACC and the Big 12 are not going to be able to match that media money that's going to go to their student athletes in their compensation model. So in other words, the hidden motivation with these two conferences coming together, besides all the other issues, is to set a compensation model that satisfies everybody in their conferences, that doesn't knife each other conference. In other words, one conference suddenly decides to offer a whole lot more. They want some sort of contracts with the student athletes. That's going to have to happen. There's going to be NIL contracts with the student athletes. That's going to happen. The Big 12 and the ACC are going to have, this is what is perceived here from the Big 10 and the SEC, the Big 12 and the ACC are going to have their own compensation packages, their own compensation model for their student athletes in basketball and football. And you can start to see why. We've talked about this since episode 1 of this channel. You can start to see why North Carolina is going to want to get out of the ACC. No offense to the ACC, but you're always going to want to get to higher land. You can see FSU, why they want to get to the SEC of the Big Ten. You can see why Clemson, because eventually they're going to get that money coming from the conference to their student athletes that their NIL, that their boosters are not going to have to make up. It's why USC, UCLA called the Big Ten, to get above the stratification line. You're seeing the stratification line played out. It's starting to play out. And the SEC and the Big Ten, I'm shooting to you straight. This is there's a whole lot of reasons why they're having an advisory group. But let me get back to you. Before I get to your comments and phone calls, I can't really get into too much more in the conversation I had this afternoon. But again, the last part of this article, many within college sports believe Sankey and PATC need to lead the enterprise toward a long-term solution on the issue of athlete compensation. That issue right there is the big one. Yeah, transfer portal, all that is big, but it all relates to the compensation model. And the Big Ten and the SEC are going to make sure that they're going to have the freedom to compensate their student athletes to a certain degree out of their big, huge media money deals that the other conferences are not going to be able to match up. And then the differential, the schools with the biggest alumni, boosters, biggest success, your Buckeyes, your Wolverines, your Crimson Tide, your LSU, go on and on. Those big schools, they're going to make a whole lot more. They're going to be able to compensate their student athletes more than the other Big Ten and SEC schools. But those Big Ten and SEC schools that are in the bottom half of being able to compensate their players, they're going to get that flat fee, that the big money coming out of that media money to differentiate themselves from other schools and other conferences. But they want to nail down this compensation model, because if they nail that down, if they get the freedom, they can bring in, now that, the ACC and the Big 12, there's got to be an agreement with a lot of these issues across the board, right? Transfer portal, signing period, early signing period. Are we going to have 2 signing periods? Are we going to have a couple different portal windows or just one portal window? All going to be decided with some sort of CBA, collective bargaining with the conferences. There's going to have to be a universal agreement. But when it comes to the compensation model, the Big Ten and the SEC are going to look different than the ACC and the Big 12. The ACC and the Big 12 are going to look different than the Mountain West, the Sun Belt, and the other G5 conferences. That is the hidden agenda. That is the cloak and dagger. Now this advisory groups, they're not even been formed yet. We don't know the composition yet. But as we head into these meetings, we get reports on it. Compensation model is the big nut that the Big Ten and the SEC is going to crack, hopefully, from their perspective. And I don't think this comes as a surprise to it doesn't come as a surprise to the Big 12 and the ACC. But I had to lay it out there bare for everybody in this community. I mean, we've been talking about it. I've been talking about this. In fact, if you go through my tweets of March of 2022, these were the exact reasons why USC called the Big Ten. This is the information that was given to me. USC wanted to make sure that whatever they wanted to be able to match, whatever other school is matching when it comes to paying student athletes, because they knew that time was a-coming. It's the same thing that Oklahoma and Texas called the SEC. And the Big 12 made sure that they stayed as a conference. They poached the Pac-12. This is the straw that has been stirring the drink. This advisory group that's being created, this is the formal talks of creating the compensation model. This is where they're going to get to the brass. This is where they're going to say, okay, what is that money how much percentage of our media TV deal are we going to give to student athletes? This is going to be all discussed in the advisory group, because they're going to need to know that before they solve these other issues. Just wanted to put it out there. I'm going to get to your comments. We're going to open up the phone lines right now. We're not going to waste any time. We're going to get to your comments. Let me get to a super chat here. Phone line is open. 763-260-1333. The line is open. The phone line is open. Ryan Thomas is basically a strategic arms limitation treaty. That is, yes. If they can get away with it. Because, I'm so glad you brought this up, Ryan Thomas. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for your generosity. There's not going to be a cap on NIL. There's not going to be a cap. They keep talking about a cap. There's not going to be a cap. You can't put a cap on a student name and image and likeness. You can't put a cap on a student athlete name, image, and likeness. It's not going to happen. But there is going to be a cap, I believe, or I should say, there probably isn't going to be a cap. I mean, there probably is going to be a cap. When it comes to its cost containment, strategic arms limitation treaty on the money that's going from the conference, it could be conference to the school and then to the athlete, but you get my point. Where the conference, where the money that they're making in their media contract, a percentage of that is going to go to the student athletes. All the football players are going to get the same thing. That's the limitation treaty.
Call from
Ryan Thomas.
Ryan Thomas, the floor is yours. How you doing, sir?
Doing good. I guess I'm the straw that's stirring the drink on PATC today. So
yes.
But what I mean by that is, the SEC in the Big Ten, because they're getting paid about the same in media revenue.
Yeah.
I mean, they got to make sure that there's some ground rules because, and even the teams that are in the bottom end of those leagues, they got to they want to kind of come to terms with basically some ground rules to make sure that that an arms race really doesn't get out of hand. And I think that that's sort of what they're trying to do, is maintain a balance of power between the two. And I mean, it's understandable given their position, and whatever rules they adopt or whatever rules they take up, the Big 12 and ACC are free to adopt those.
Yeah.
And if they can afford to, and but right now the situation is there are some issues that they're going to have to figure out, and one of those, on addition to trying to figure out how Title IX plays into all this, trying to figure out basically the logistics of it. So it's sort of, people need to kind of realize is, I mean, they're the ones who are sort of the top of the food chain, and what they dictate is going to kind of trickle down to everybody else. But I mean, the SEC and the Big Ten both understand, and they both see the arms race right now and what's happened with conference realignment. And I think that they're basically trying to get some ground rules and how they're going to cooperate between each other moving forward.
Yes.
I mean, that's my thought on it, and I mean, and I certainly think I don't think the ACC is long for this earth, Greg. So,
yes, and it's. I mean, let's just take it forward a little bit. Let's just speculate here. I got, first of all, right before we started this live show, I got criticized, which is fine because that comes with the territory. But I got criticized on a message board because we do a lot of speculation here. Well, no kidding, we do a lot of speculation here. It's college football. I can't even figure out what's going to happen the next day. Okay, I'm sorry to get that out. Jeez. What?
Well, you got to tell them to stop cheesification your takes, Greg.
It's like, holy smokes. Anyways, what were you saying before I got all riled up?
I'm just sort of saying, like, the ACC isn't long.
Oh, yeah. So let's take it forward. Excuse me. I'm sorry, Ryan. I lost my mind there.
No, you're fine, Greg.
So let's take it forward a little bit. Let's just say, for sake of discussion, that the ACC does implode. That case, and I think it's starting to look weaker and weaker for the ACC, much weaker than I ever thought I would think about this. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say the ACC implodes, and the Big 12's going to probably grab some very valuable teams. I'm sorry, there just are. If the ACC implodes away, it could. We're speculating here, okay? So now those Big 12 schools, those 20 schools or those 18 schools, they're going to make sure that they press their advantages over everybody else, over the ACC schools that remain in whatever conference they form. You know what I'm saying? Exactly. Yeah, and that's what I think that is what we were told is they're going to reach their own. It isn't like, I don't know how to say this. It isn't like BYU's mechanism of paying their student athletes is going to differ than the way the Ohio State Buckeyes do. It's just that the Buckeyes are going to make sure that nothing constricts them, at least in part of that model. And then the other part of that model, they want their conference probably to be healthy, and that's where that media money comes into. BYU, the Big 12 are probably going to do probably the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has a good floor, but then other schools are going to have a higher ceiling. That's just the way it is.
And that's the way it is even within those conferences.
Yes, now it is. Yes.
And that's the reality. And but I mean, I certainly think that, and Immaculate has said this a million times, And if he has time to call in, he's going to call in and provide, a much more eloquent, more coherent take on this than I am. But the NCAA, as far as the rules and the things it administers, it does a lot of stuff, a lot of mundane stuff. And, this is not about breaking away from the NCAA. This is basically this is about getting the autonomy to set a policy that best fits their circumstances.
Yes.
Because clearly what Charlie Baker proposed, what he proposed sounded great for the G5. And it sounded great for, some of the schools on the lower end of it. But, when you're getting all this extra money and just the playing field's different, the circumstances are different, it's the policy has to be different. And, people can come up with the conspiracy theories all they want, but I can tell you right now, the Big Ten and the SEC don't want to go through all these compliance, and they don't want to go through all the administrative crap that the NCAA does. They just want to be able to shape the policy, just like getting the autonomous 4 power or autonomous 5 power. And that's what it is. But anyway, I'm going to get off the line because I know there's other smarter people that have better and smarter things to say than me. But
I don't know about that, but I appreciate it, Ryan.
No problem. Thanks, Greg. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Great call by Ryan Thomas. Thank you so much, Ryan. I always appreciate your calls. Ryan, Willie, the evil Badger. I believe that college football could be on the edge of a disaster. Ruining college football, eventually NFL. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate once again you being early peak cloak and dagger. You, sir, are knighted once again. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Tony, I am not Puxatani Phil, really goalie in disguise. Not really. Thank you, Tony, for the super chat. I appreciate it. What did Phil say this year? Did he see his shadow? I don't know. I did not pay attention. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate the super chat so very much. I do know this. I am, how old am I? I don't even remember how old I am. I'm 55 years old, soon to be 56. And this is the mildest winter I've ever lived through in my life. And I've lived in Minnesota my whole life. This is by far the mildest winter. This is absolutely ridiculous.
Call from
Ryan Rasmussen.
to accept.
I'm sorry, did not get the name?
Ryan,
thanks for calling, sir. The floor is yours.
Oh, Greg, you talked me off the edge. I'll tell you that. And I haven't actually listened to your opening monologue, but when you said it's not about them breaking off, that calmed me down a little bit.
No. I mean, who knows what the future will bring, right?
Yeah.
But it's not about breaking off. It's not. They already have enough lawsuits coming at them. They don't need another one. No, it's not about the breakaway. Mm-mm.
Well, that's good. The one thing that I had, just kind of going down the rabbit hole of how to bend the break off, which this isn't, but if that ever happens, I think the thing that I don't think it will be what anybody really thinks it will be. I think there's a lot of schools that probably think, hey, we deserve the money, we want it. Like, we don't want to share with anybody lower than us, and the idea of it is like, I get it, but I think the problem is if we ever go that far down this road, we got to remember that college football is a niche audience. We're very passionate. We love college football, but we're not the fan base that even the NFL has, right? There is this special group of fans.
Yeah.
And if you ever were to break off where it was just the world of the SEC and Big Ten all on their own, well, I mean, first of all, you're cutting off several states from college football.
Yeah.
And even the states that you're keeping, the one that like makes me like, could you imagine a world where Texas only has 2 schools in major college athletics, like or football, right? Like the state of Texas, where there are high school stadiums that are better than some colleges' football stadiums, right? Like for them to only have Texas and only A&M, like, and as an outside viewer, it's very clear that in Texas, you either love Texas or you hate Texas, and there's not a much in between. So, that move could be very polarizing for like one of the biggest football areas for, in the state. And so, anyways, but I was glad that I jumped on yours and you were like immediately reassuring that that's not what this is.
I'm not. Look, again, I have been as clear as I possibly could be, but yet still people take my words and they just make up whatever they want to make up. Power 2 is about power and influence. Right now, it's not about breakaway or cutting off playoff access, and it might never be. And I think it may. Who knows? We'll get to that 10 years down the road. But it is. Yeah. It isn't about now. Look, I'm a radical on the other side. There are some radicals out there that want to power 2, only these 2 conferences. I'm a radical on the other side. A lot of people here disagree with me on the other side. I want the G5 to remain to keep their playoff access. I don't want them to have their own separate playoffs like a lot of you believe, because they're not going to make us much money. I want that playoff money to fill in their coffers as well, so they can pay for student athletes in other sports, for football players, for their health of their football players. I want those G5 players to be able to get exposure, for their athletic departments to make money, so they can move up in the portal like they're doing now. Some of these great players working hard, they get up and they go into a Big 10, SEC, Big 12, ACC conference. I don't want that to stop. I don't want any of it to stop. I do believe that the Big 10, the SEC are going to push the leverage when it comes to revenue. When it comes to revenue, paying the student athletes and also possibly receiving a little bit more in the playoff distribution model. We're going to have to fight. We'll figure out how that all works down the road here. But when it comes to cutting things off, I don't see it happening. I still don't see it happening. Maybe I'm naive. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe we're crazy together because it seems like we agree. But that's where we are.
No, I hope you're right. I hope you're right, because I think that that's what makes the sport healthy. Like, even if, like, let's say the Boise States of the world, even if they have a very low chance of actually winning the national championship, just having that chance is what keeps the sport healthy, right? Like, the fact that they don't walk onto the field, practice after spring practice and know, well, you're done, right? Like, you're never going to get there. Like, even that level of a chance, like, that's what keeps the sport healthy. And that's why we love the NCAA basketball tournament. These Cinderella stories, like, they're fascinating. They're fun to watch. The other thing that I'm, like, looking at is, I think that one thing that probably could come up with this, and we may be headed to it, is I don't know if the NCAA is going to survive much longer. Like, I know that not everybody wants to take on the mantle that they have to take on, but they've just done such a horrible job that I think somebody's going to have to probably take it over for them. Like, if that's what it becomes, because they can't get out of their own way. Like, I can't, like, they've, unfortunately, like, I feel bad because it's like, man, if they had been forward thinking, we wouldn't be in the place we are with NIL. Like, had they rolled it out, they could have rolled it out with limits, with rules, but because they waited and had the doors busted in on them by legal, we're in a free-for-all, and you can't take it back now. Like, you can't go backwards just because you're taking something away from the players that they finally have a right to, right? Like, nobody's going to let them win.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing with the transfer rules. Like, they gave them these rights, and then when they went to take them away, the courts are like, no, you don't get to do that. And so, there's no way to, just go back and put all these limits on NIL, but had they been forward-thinking, said, hey, no, we need to evolve, these players do deserve these rights, they could have rolled them out with rules, and the courts would have been okay with that, but because they did nothing but fight it, and then the courts opened the door, there's just no going back, unfortunately, for that, because anything that we do, it has to be something new. You can't try to take anything away from these players, because I think the courts have made it clear they will rule on the side of the players. And honestly, it's probably past time that they deserve the freedoms that they've now earned.
Again, I don't want to, you're correct, but the NCAA serves at the pleasure of the commissioners who serve at the pleasure of the presidents. So the NCAA is the creation of the presidents and the commissioners. So the NCAA is only staffed, they only have so many employees based upon the support they get. The rules and everything else is based upon the presidents and the commissioners. So the NCAA has become just a place where everybody can dump their negative feelings onto. But this is really, look, I'm going to say it again. Greg Sankey, he's been way behind on all this, way behind. And now he's finally catching up. I know he digged into the NCAA once again about NIL, but he didn't have the answers. So I put a lot of blame on the presidents and the commissioners as well. I'll put it that way.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'll get off so somebody else can get on, but thanks again for everything you do, and like I said, calming me down today.
Got it, no problem.
My friend and me were texting back and forth gifts of The Godfather over this. So
yeah, no, this is not about a breakaway. Not at this point. Years down the road, who knows, right? But we've got enough stuff going on. Let's deal with reality here. Let's deal with it's not about a breakaway. There is a power too, but it's about power and influence. It's not about separating themselves from everybody else. Not in 2024, not in 25, not in 26, not in 27. All righty?
Perfect.
Appreciate it, man.
I'll keep listening.
You got it.
See ya.
Thank you. Yeah. Coy, thank you so much for your gift once again. Holy smokes. Coy, thank you once again for incredible generosity to this channel. You keep giving out gift memberships. Thank you so very much. Coy, you are knighted once again. Except for I hit the wrong sound bar. My bad. Oh boy, am I screwing up today. Thank you, Coy. Appreciate it. You are gifted once again. Sheep in Wolf's Clothing. You are now a Cloak and Dagger Early Peak member. Take a look at those Early Peak member episodes. We may be dropping one tomorrow morning. Always keep your head on a swivel. We also have...
Call from
Immaculate.
Immaculate. Can you hold on 1 second, sir?
Sure can.
I do appreciate it. I want to congratulate Lewis. Awesome clips. Joaquin Morales, P. Digits, and Irvin Williams for becoming Early Peak members. Cloak and Dagger Early Peak member. You are all 5 of you united. Congratulations. That opens up the Cloak and Dagger Early Peak episodes that we're going to be producing here pretty soon once again. Mr. Immaculate, Mr. Hot Guy, the floor is yours. What do you got to say, sir?
Well, first off, how you doing, Greg? You hanging in there with this? I know I'm getting a little stressed, but
Yeah,
how are
doing
you
good.
doing?
Doing good. You know, I haven't had a show the last 2 days, so I'm all fresh,
Oh, you're good
ready
to
to
go.
go.
Well, I'll tell you, I appreciate all you're saying. I know folks are very worried about this, and understandably so.
Yeah.
But I think, like you were saying, the answer to all of this isn't quite as extravagant as some people are worried about. It's not. Now, who knows what comes from conversations, right? Like,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's anything about this right now that says that this is them separating from someone else. And there's a statement in Dellinger's article that I thought I would read out real quick, if you don't mind,
Go
just
ahead.
to kind of let folks wonder why this is happening. And I've had my critiques of Dellinger, and he clearly listens to Sankey. But in this part, what he says here really kind of resounded with me. Sankey was saying that he was at the meetings in Phoenix. We talked about that at the convention meetings, where he was in the Division I Council governing body meetings, and he was asked by administrators there, when are you in the Big Ten going to tell us what you want? And he's saying that was, a main motivating factor for them actually coming together and doing this. Like, they're being asked.
Yeah, I'm
What
putting
is
it
it
up
you
on the
want?
screen right now. Yep.
What do you guys want? Like, so everyone wants to kind of make this work. So maybe now these two conferences are coming together finally, which, as a Big Ten person, you could probably attest to this. The fact that they're actually coming together like this is pretty astounding.
Yes.
Like, they generally do not get along at all.
Yes. Well, they're quite different in a lot of ways. So
Yeah.
yes, I would agree. And this makes, look, we talk about realignment, things starting from the very top. The top domino has to fall before other things happen. It's like this, right? The Big Ten and the SEC have to figure out what they want. What do you want? Because everyone else is going to take, exactly what you guys do or change it a little bit or whatever. But what does the Big Ten and the SEC want? Absolutely.
It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what they're going to get. It just is like, okay, start the negotiation. Like, give us a place to start. Now, maybe they won't quite get the full amount that they want. Maybe when this conversation goes wider, but they are at that highest potential level of, taking advantage of things or whatever. So, like, where is it you guys are looking to go? And let's go from there. And if we have to bring it down a little bit in order for everyone to come into agreement, that's fine. But with these two schools never really ever talking before, or two conferences never really talking before, that was probably pretty hard to figure out. So maybe now they can get this worked out together. And like I'd say to people, this doesn't mean anything that comes out of there is absolutely going to happen. People think that the Big Ten and the SEC come walking in the door, snap their fingers, and stuff gets done. Like if that was the case, we wouldn't be in this situation right now.
Yep. Yeah, you're right about that. I believe though they want to build consensus among those two conferences first.
Sure.
And then see So
yeah, and then we'll see where it goes from there. But like,
yeah.
I mean, they're saying, like, whether you believe them or not, it's up to someone's own opinion. But they're saying, look, this isn't the precursor to breaking away. And I try and tell people, like, look, if they wanted to break away, they could have did it in 2014. They put up a vote for student athlete stipends, and it got voted down in the NCAA. The NCAA said no, because that's what the NCAA does. It's a political madhouse. And they said, basically, we need some type of solution to this. Otherwise, we're facing legal issues and all other things in the future. And boy, were they right. But they said they needed a solution to it. Otherwise, they were going to have to leave the NCAA. And lo and behold, what happened? Well, here, we'll create an entirely brand new voting structure for you, just for these few little problems you brought up. And that's the autonomous conferences voting structure. Yeah. So they have this thing there that, it basically could be a nuclear engine but instead it's only powered by coal right now.
Yeah.
For lack of better comparison, the amount of stuff that they can funnel through that compared to what the NCAA does. The NCAA is meant to not change. It's meant to not make big changes happen. Whereas the autonomous system is just the opposite. It's meant for them to kind of pass things quickly, quietly, not make a big deal about it. Just get things done. They don't even have to play the media game. Like, I don't think people realize how quickly changes could happen if they get full or near full governance with that structure. I put out a tweet for people who, might hear me talk about this, just to maybe understand what it is and how small that structure is compared to all the rest and how quickly things happen there. It's like 2 steps versus 20 within the NCAA. So I just think, like you're saying, like, this is just these 2 conferences for the first time trying to figure out how to talk. I mean, it's just to anyone maybe in these conferences, they understand that. And to everyone else, it's like this big fear, like they're...
Yeah, and I wanna say something real quick. Apologize, Immaculate, but Go Black in the chat here says the Big Ten has to talk to those dirty Southerns. How terrible! That's not what we were saying. Go Black 45.
No, but you know what? The folks in the South are probably thinking the same thing.
No,
do we really have to talk to them?
I want to clear this up. When I said that those two they're different. They're just there's a lot of differences between the two. It doesn't mean one is better than the other. I'll just give you some examples. They both disagree with each other on early signing period when it comes to football. They both disagree with each other on the baseball schedule. The Big Ten's been trying to push the baseball schedule more towards the late spring, early summer, go over a couple of some. Big Ten wants a different baseball schedule, but they haven't been able to get it done. They different on networks. Of course, they're proxies for the networks for Fox Sports, and they have different sponsored sports. The Big Ten sponsors way more sports. So when they're talking about, there's a whole bunch of issues that have nothing to do with one conference being clean and pristine and the other one being dirty. Has nothing to do with that. They're just different. They are different. And the Big 12 is different from the Pac-12. It's just the way it is. They have different interests. Go ahead, Immaculate. Go. I apologize. I interrupted you.
No, you're good. That was a good explanation, and I would reiterate that and say it's not a judgmental thing of like looking down. I mean, and that's not to say that some of them that's not happening. I'm saying it's happening both ways if it's happening. Like I lived down in Louisiana for a while. There's the same perspective looking upwards, and there's just a lot of distrust. And like you're saying with the baseball thing, it's also in the SEC's best interest to not allow that to happen because of the temperatures down there. That benefits them if Big Ten schools can't really get into baseball as much, and the Big Ten moves so that they can. It's just, it's just been competing interests. The two, it's. I'm not saying who's who. I'm just saying it's kind of like USA versus USR. Like it's 2 superpowers that have never gotten along, and now because with House versus NCAA looming on the horizon, which is going to smash everybody, now all of a sudden they're looking at each other going, well, all right, I think we can get along now.
Yeah, they want to get along now so the courts don't smash them anymore. I also believe we were told that they want to get along now when it comes to the compensation model so they don't smash each other, that they can fulfill their so they can, at the best of their ability, use the advantage they have. So that's why they're getting along right now. Great points, Immaculate.
Yeah, so with the show, we're doing the show tonight later, with a lot of the Big 12 folks that we reach out to, just wanted to be like, look, this doesn't mean like they're telling Yormark, go sit over at the kiddie table. No. It's just, this is just something they need to work out. They need to figure some things out between each other. And then this doesn't mean, if they're going through the autonomous voting system, which I think they are, that all of a sudden their votes are going to have more more clout. It's one vote for the conference, I think, or per school. The way they got it worked out, there's like 3 students. Anyways, it doesn't really pertain to that yet, and so people are gonna fear, and that's pretty much all I had to say about it with you. But I just wanted to get that out for folks to be like, just if at all possible, just kind of roll with this one.
Yeah.
It might be hard to understand. Yeah. They're just feeling each other out. So good luck with this, man. I know you're probably about to have some fun phone calls and some fun folks reaching out to you, but good job. I really appreciate what you
All right. Appreciate it, Immaculate, Mr. Hawkeye. Thanks. Great phone call. Ryan Willie, thank you for your incredible generosity. Big super chat. Thank you, Mr. Willie. Most of the states around the country only college sports for sports entertainment. When the Milwaukee almost lost the Bucks, I was afraid that Wisconsin would turn into Iowa and Nebraska with cornfields all over the place. Thank you so much, Ryan. I appreciate it. And that's what makes Minnesota different, because Minnesota is such a professional sport state. Thank you for the super chat, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Call from
Lewis, the legendary caller, the Duke Blue Devil himself. Lewis, the floor is yours.
Well, good evening. Well, first of all, I was gifted an early peak membership, and I'll admit I'm barely up on even what that means. But
you know what that means? Let me show you real quick, buddy. Let me show you. If you look at your screen, college football, Cloak and Dagger, early peak. Those are episodes giving you the little bit of Cloak and Dagger information before we come on live. Just go to our YouTube channel. Make sure you got your notifications on.
All right.
And if for those who do not have a membership, go to our YouTube channel and hit the join button. Lewis, the floor is yours.
Today's news is entirely foreseeable. There was a stark reminder of where we're going with this when we saw the Final 12 come out this year. The Final 12 were all teams that are going to be in the SEC or the Big Ten in the future. And even though in form they may not break away, because it would create issues for college basketball, it would create litigation, it would create political issues in the states that have schools of both type in the state with the legislators. In a substance, they have broken away. It's going to be very difficult in the NIL world to have a Cinderella in football, to have a situation where you have a TCU get to the final game. You're probably not going to see anybody other than about 10 or 12 schools win the championship, and that's just how it is, because the schools can now legally pay players, and so the schools with 110,000-seat stadium simply have more money than a Duke that brings in 10,000 a game and has a 40,000-seat stadium, or even a West Virginia that has a 60,000-seat stadium. They just can't compete, and the money is going to be different. So this is really about the two moving forward. Schools are going to try to get in. It's really just a matter of when they round out their memberships, who's in and who's out. The Big 12 and the ACC will be the next tier down, and they'll compete. But I just don't think in the sport of football they can win. Now, they cannot just break away easily, because or they could, but basketball, in the sport of basketball, the national champion will be whoever's in the rest. The two conferences with those teams cannot claim a true national champion if you have other schools left out. So I don't think that is going to happen, but from a substantive standpoint, they have broken away. They are going to chart the rules, and it will leave everybody else in a difficult situation as far as competing for a championship. Schools will have to settle for getting into the playoff or winning a bowl, and that's just the way it is, because it's money. You follow the money, and that's just how it is until that can be controlled. And everybody will be rooting for an underdog. Everybody will be rooting for somebody to go and win. I just don't think it's going to happen. And so they could say all they want. It's not about breaking away, but they are separating themselves. So it comes down then to the only question left. If you assume that FSU and Miami are the two to get to 20 in the Big Ten, is whether or not politically and financially the SEC wants to get North Carolina and Virginia so badly that they have to take 4 schools and dilute the pie 20 ways when they really only need 2 to accomplish the same financial model. And if they do that, then those 4 will leave, and then that'll be that. And then there'll be some left over. Or if they don't do it, then the ACC minus the Florida schools would limp along as a conference damaged, but still in that same tier with the Big 12. So that's really all that's left to decide. And schools are going to try to get to the top conferences. And I do think eventually some schools will get kicked out of the top conferences too, because they'll demand a buy-in. Now that might be 15, 20 years from now, but eventually it's just the schools that have the money, that have the $1 billion to invest over a period of years in their football programs will do this. It might be bad overall for the sport because you're leaving a lot of people out. It might hurt ratings, and it'll create different tiers. But when you're paying the athletes, that's just the way it is. And so they can say all they want. It's not. From a substantive standpoint, those 2 schools are there. And if you want a question, just look at the Final 12 this year and look at most of the projections for college for the playoff next year. They don't predict the ACC or the Big 12 to get a second team in. They expect all of those at-large positions to go to the Big 10 and the SEC, and that's what I think will happen. So that's my thought. Have a great weekend. It's Groundhog Day. Phil here in Pennsylvania did not see his shadows, so it's going to be an early spring. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lewis. Appreciate it. Great call, Lewis. So Lewis says it's not a breakaway, but it is a separation. Sean basically says the same thing. The breakaway will be more subtle. Then imagine there would be compensation packages provided by the SEC and the Big Ten that the other conferences can't match. It might be 10 years, but it will happen. And I agree with that. And I think and that's what we were told this afternoon. That's the hidden motivation. Besides all the other things they're going to be talking about, the compensation model, making sure the SEC and the Big Ten don't knife each other, making sure that the schools, that they can get some consensus within each conference, making sure that the big schools can still outspend all the other schools in both those conferences when it comes to NIL, by making sure everybody's floor is risen when it comes to student-athlete compensation, use the media money, the conferences paying the student-athletes, having the student-athletes sign all-inclusive NIL deals and possibly other deals, making themselves at least quasi-employees. But yeah, I agree, Sean. It's a great way of putting it. Great call, Immaculate and Lewis, Mr. Buckeye, Gerald Jones, Matthew Carlson. Great call, Tony. Great call, Lewis, Immaculate. Nice hearing from Lewis. RX, because the alliance worked out so well. Yeah. Duke has the most expensive tickets in college basketball. Greg, are my Jayhawks in danger? Danger of what? They're in the Big 12, and the Big 12 is not in danger of losing playoff access. But the compensation model, if I'm to believe what I was told, and I'm going to go ahead and believe it, the compensation model, it's going to be the same type of structure, but Kansas is going to have to make up the difference when it comes to paying their student athletes through NIL, when it comes to their boosters, make up the difference versus, let's say, a Maryland. Maryland student athletes are going to make more money from payments from the conference. They just are than Kansas student athletes. And then Kansas student athletes, if Kansas wants to match, they're going to have to do it through NIL. And maybe they will. There's going to be schools out there that are going to, but they're going to have to ask more from their boosters versus the schools that are in the Big Ten and the SEC. It's all about that stratification line, and that's where we're at. But are they in danger? No, not in danger of losing playoff access. Kansas is still going to be battling, in my opinion, for the men's basketball national championship almost every year, and Minnesota won't be. If that gives you that's not going to change. That's not going to change. It's just that the Big Ten and the SEC's compensation packages are going to be different, coming from the conference/schools to student athletes than the Big 12 and the ACC schools. But some of that's going to be made up because some of these Big 12 ACC schools, a couple of the ACC schools, have really good, rich NIL collectives. And each and every year they're going to have to try to make up the difference. Now, that's impossible. But they're going to do the best they can. This is why Florida State's trying to get out of the ACC. Not because it's going to be easier to win a conference championship in the SEC or the Big Ten. They want to get there because if they can get in the Big Ten and the SEC, then 6-7 years down the road, or maybe right away, I don't know, when they become fully invested member of the SEC, the Big Ten, they will be above that stratification line. That's why Florida State is risking. That's why they're going to the courts. That's why they're trying to get out of the grant of rights. Sports will be cut, unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, yes. Above average call, immaculate. Okay, phone lines are open. 763-260-1333. I can I'm going to go to this article here. We did not go through it yet. Yahoo Sports. This was the first one to break. Ross Dellinger today. College football kings are aligning in an effort to pave the sport's future path. A nameless joint effort, it doesn't have a name yet, a historic cooperative movement between the country's most powerful leagues is an initial step in their intent to steer the future of college athletics. They want to have the authority shift from NCAA's old age national governance model to its more prominent conferences. They want conferences to have more control, right? They want the Big 12 to have more control, the ACC to have more control, Big 10, SEC. There's an urgent mission among the Big 10 and the SEC commissioners to find solutions for issues such as ongoing antitrust lawsuits and that $1 billion House case. There's disagreement over the NCAA's new governance proposal, Project D1. Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti calls the joint move a meaningful step in an effort to fix things. Greg Sankey wants common sense solution, hopes it leads to a much brighter horizon. The commissioners both strongly rebuke any notion that the creation of this advisory board is a move toward a breakaway from college sports governing body. We believe that to be correct. The Big Ten and the SEC remain prominent members of the NCAA, both in governance and national competition. The joint board does not hold unilateral authority, and they will have no motivation to simply declare anything. The pressures are mounting. Petiti, you can see the pace that others are getting involved in college athletics is increasing. So the pace of the solutions to the problems being identified has to increase. I wonder if when Tony Petiti says this, you can see the pace that others are getting involved in college athletics. I wonder if Petiti is thinking about, when he says that, private equity companies, firms. You can see the pace that others are getting involved in with college athletics. While the commissioners say their express goal is not succession, the creation of the joint board feels something like much more grandiose in the making. The college footballs, two behemoths sharing ideas, plans, and models for the future. From a revenue perspective, schools in the Big Ten and SEC will earn at least $25 million more than the next conference media rights deal. Similarities have brought them together. Some within college athletics look at this budding bond between the two Goliaths as the latest threat on their enterprise. Others describe it as a necessary evil that they may generate real accelerated progress in an era of urgent modernization. This is what Immaculate talked about when he called into our show. When are you in the Big Ten going to tell us what you want? While circumstances have long pointed toward an affiliation between the two leagues, an event just last month triggered the move. While at the NCAA convention in Phoenix, Sankey participated in meetings of the Division I Council, the NCAA's second highest ranking D1 governance body. He left the meetings realizing that many of these most challenging issues reside here with us. He said of the two conferences, I was asked in Phoenix by administrators, when are you in the Big Ten going to tell us what you want? That was a motivating factor, Sankey said. I think that's about it. There's no logo, no news conference, no flashy backdrop. There's not even a name to this advisory group. I don't expect we agree on everything, Sankey said. We want our teams to succeed. Okay, so that basically covers that article. The phone lines are open, 763-260-1333. 763-260-1333. The pace of solutions with the traditional NCAA voting mechanism is extremely slow to non-existent. Petiti alluding to the need for that faster model to be empowered. Great question, great comment by Take Town Hawk. If private equity gets involved, who has the final decision-making authority over athletics? Chancellor Goldman Sachs, depending on the agreement, right? Right? Between the university and private
Call
equity.
from
JD.
JD, Mr. Seminole is on the line. Lots of things going on at Florida State there. What was the latest news? I can't remember. It was
The most recent thing was the ACC responded yesterday evening, filing an amendment looking to seal all documentation from public view.
Yes.
The filing on Monday caught them off guard. They weren't expecting that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some rumors floating around that FSU has a lot more where that came from, and it is a lot more damning, I guess is what you would say. So we'll just see. No verification, just rumors. So, I got to apologize. I started listening to your monologue, and then I got a series of phone calls, so I've missed the last 45 minutes. But I wanted to chime in on the whole, I guess alliance may not necessarily be the right word, but collaboration between the SEC and Big Ten, if I could.
Yep.
And if somebody else has already said that, I'm not trying, or what I'm about to say,
No,
I'm not
go
trying
ahead.
to be redundant.
No problem.
The SEC now recognizes the Big Ten as their peer. Up to this point, I'm not so sure that they have. They felt like they were the preeminent conference, and now there's two seats at the table. Do you have it? Do you see that as well? I mean, is that something that you?
There's probably a lot to that, yes, and there has. It sounds like when it comes to interpersonal relationship between Petiti and Sankey, there's something there that hasn't been there for a long time between the two conferences. Relationships always matter in these things, so I think that's helping out as well.
There's a growing arms race coming. That it's obvious the Big Ten wants to compete and be the premier conference in the country. And what's the old saying? Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Is that what it is? I forget what it was. And the whole NIL, player compensation, all the rest of this, there could be a war between conferences and everything else. And it's good to see that they're kind of collaborating. I think they're going to collaborate on salary caps, what I kind of think.
Well, when it comes to the money coming from the conference/school, when it comes to that media money, yes. But when it comes to NIL, no. So that's what was part of my monologue. In other words, they're looking for a compensation model in which the big schools that have the big money, the alumnus, the all 100,000 tickets and all this stuff, you're still going to be the big school. You're still going to have a revenue advantage. You're going to be satisfied. But that advantage is going to come out of your NIL. That's where the money's going to flow through. But the other schools in the SEC and the Big Ten that can't meet the big guys with that, you're going to get a revenue, you're going to get a money from that media, right? Every school, the big ones, the middle ones, and the little ones, the medium ones and little ones, and these two big conferences, there's going to be a real big time payment to student athletes when it comes to compensation coming out of the media money. That's the compensation model that they're looking for. So they want to satisfy all the interests in these two big conferences, because Ohio State's different than Indiana, Mississippi's different than Alabama. But if you have a burgeoning NIL, no cap NIL, and you have a cap, good, high payout to each school when it comes to media money, you can satisfy all parties in both those conferences. That is the theory. That's what people believe. And they want to make sure that one conference doesn't get into an arms race with the other conference when it comes to that media money, right? They want to have that advantage over the ACC and the Big 12, but they don't want to get into this big brouhaha between the two conferences. Back to you.
Well, you just touched on what my next statement was they want to go ahead and establish the guidelines and pretty much establish the battlefield before they allow the other groups into the room.
Yes. That's the hidden motivation. Yes, sir.
Okay. That was where my call came in, and then after that call, I had to call somebody in. So I appreciate you filling me in on that, and as far as the FSU stuff, I mean, everybody pretty much knows most everything right now. The only thing is that I think it could get uglier soon, but I definitely think FSU has the advantage right now.
Yeah.
It's just.
I
go
agree,
ahead. I'm sorry.
Man. I agree.
Well,
and the people I talk to agree. Go ahead.
Have you talked to the money perch?
Yes. Everybody thinks this is going better than they ever. This is going better than they thought. Florida State had more in their arsenal than the people that I talked to, which some of them are in the industry of reporting. This is going better for Florida State than anybody perceived that it was going to go. Now, what does that mean down the line with the courts and everything? So I don't know. But things are going better for Florida State than what was expected. No question about it.
Well, I have a feeling a lot is going to happen between now and the 15th. Because how in the world do you go into the winter meetings and everything is just business as usual?
Yeah.
I mean, FSU is gone. I've heard this from everywhere. Some people are saying, well, if they lose in court, they'll have to stick it out. But no, they're leaving one way or the other. They burned the bridge. It's done. You don't go back after this. But I think the quote-unquote buyout scenario is going to be even better than I thought. If they play in 2024, I see the ACC getting to keep the buyout or keep the media revenue payouts, and that's about it. There's allegations of impropriety by the ACC, and that's what they're wanting to hide. And I'm not going to go too much into it because I've heard the rumors from somebody else, and then I also heard something similar on a YouTube show, and I'm just not going to go there. But it's just if some of those allegations are true, wow. I mean, the ACC might just implode over the off season if that's true.
Now, Yeah. Now, Clemson has remained quiet. No interviews, no communication, no nothing outside of the university leadership and athletic department. People, all the way until this morning, maybe something has changed since this morning, but since this morning, Friday, February 2nd, nada, nothing, zilch. They're not giving any interviews, nothing. Now, on Wednesday, February 7th, if Clemson hasn't pulled the trigger, I'm going to have to start the show with the big L. I will start the show with the big L. It's fascinating. It's beyond fascinating that Clemson will not give any interviews to anybody. And I'm talking anybody. And I don't want to say names here. Nobody. So, what does it all mean? Keep your head on a swivel. We'll find out here. I don't know.
I think it might mean they understand that the FSU court case is going better than they thought, and they might not have to step out. Maybe they step out if they need to. And I understand the whole bad faith thing about, doing some lawsuit after the winter meetings. I get it. But people have done it before. Didn't Oklahoma and Texas announce after their spring or summer meetings or something like that, and some of that was kind of called into question, but the timing just wasn't right to do it beforehand. And I'm just kind of going third party as far as that's what I heard.
Yeah.
So it's not that it's not, there's not a precedent for it, but it's just not ideal, like you suggest.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe they just think this is going better than what even they anticipated, like the FSU folks. So I don't know. I just know that everyone who's talked to FSU insiders or people inside the Moore Center, they're just like, no, we're all in now. I mean, we're out to win, and I've heard some goals that they have. I don't know how realistic they are, but I've heard some, and people kind of give you a side eye when you say it out loud. But I'm saying, they feel really, really confident. So, but anyway, I just thought I'd check in. I've had a crazy last 7 or 8 days, so I hadn't had a chance to talk to you, but I appreciate your show as always.
You got it. I appreciate it, sir. Great call, Mr. Seminole.
Thanks. Have a good evening.
You got it. I want to great call by JD, Mr. Seminole. I want to put up on the screen here Andy Staples, his comment. He wrote an article. I just want to show you a little bit of it. So, talking about the Big Ten and the SEC getting together. Let's take a look. Their job now is to find real workable solutions that allow the massive business their schools have created to run smoothly without breaking federal antitrust law. That is the most important item. Whatever you create, you can't break federal antitrust law, because then the courts are going to nail you. Back to what Andy Staples said. They need to stop whining to Congress. I agree. Earn their 7-figure salaries and solve their own problems. That will require creativity and a willingness to toss decades of NCAA dogma in the trash where it belongs. Sankey has been one of the college sports leaders fighting the hardest to get Congress to pass a law that would turn back the clock in NIL laws imposed by states beginning in 2021 and allow schools to continue suppressing players' compensation again. He needs to stop. If he and Petiti think Congress will save them, they're wasting everyone's time. Finally somebody said what I said, what I've been saying for months, for a year. Greg Sankey has not been the solution. He's not been a reformist at all. Not even close. Sankey has been one of the college sports leaders fighting the hardest to get Congress to pass a law that would turn back the clock in NIL laws. That's not going to happen. There's not going to be a cap on that. The other part of it, the media money coming from the conferences to the student athletes, that's going to satisfy the Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Missouri, the lower revenue chain brand schools. That's going to satisfy them. Uncapped NIL is going to satisfy the others. They need to develop, again, this is Andy Staples, they need to develop a system that shares revenue with the athletes. And if they like to stay out of federal court, they need to find a way to bargain with the athletes. Absolutely. Said that in episode 1. School presidents don't want athletes to be deemed employees, but that designation might be forced upon them by a few different cases currently in the pipeline. One out in California is a big one. NFL players aren't constantly suing the NFL because the NFL has a collective bargaining agreement. So does the NBA. So does Major League Baseball. A CBA would allow for rules on compensation, player movement, and tampering that would rein in all the issues college coaches and administrators currently can't stand. But the players would get a say in how those rules are written. Those rules would also be essentially lawsuit proof. Thank you, Annie Staples. Holy smokes. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. I'm going to put the phone line back on. The phone lines are open. 763-260-1333. Absolutely correct, in my opinion, is Annie Staples. If you're new to the show, or if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to our channel and make sure your notifications are on. Smash the like button if you like our content. If you don't like our content, hit the thumbs down button. Let me know in the chat how we can better improve our show to help you, the college football consumer, enjoy this show. But please subscribe to the channel and get your notifications on, because we can come on live at any time. We could go on live later tonight. You never know. You got to keep your head on a swivel. Back to the comments. Back to the phone lines. The article makes Sankey sound like he works as part of the Stanford administration. Greg, did you read my tweet to you earlier this week? I'm sure I did, Movie Time Blues. I get thousands of tweets at me. I don't remember your tweet, though. I believe you tweeted me a YouTube channel. Let me know if I'm correct on that. You wanted me to watch a YouTube commentary, and I think I did. Let me know, yes or no, Movie Time Blues, if I'm on the right path. Rule number 1, college football is realignment. Much like our host never sleeps. Realignment never sleeps. No, it doesn't. That's the number 1 rule in realignment. Second rule is the schools call the conference first, not the conference calls the school. Third rule is it's a domino. The top domino, the biggest domino falls first. The fourth rule is relationships matter. I believe those are the 4 rules. PATC's realignment rules. Let me see if there's any more great articles written about this. I also, I'm still waiting on.
Call from
Bobby.
Bobby, the floor is yours. Thanks for calling, sir.
Oh, Greg, it's always an honor to talk to the fat guy from Minnesota.
Yes, yes.
But actually, I have more questions for you, because just so that, if you got new listeners and things, people understand. So why are the schools open to these lawsuits, the You understand what I'm saying. I don't know if anybody sat down and explained that to the average person.
Well, because the students are not getting represented. They're getting they're not being represented, right? The student athletes are not being represented. Their rights, they're not getting full compensation in the marketplace. They're not even allowed to be, they're suing over money that they should have received years ago. There's no legitimacy from the NCAA. Their labor is not being, represented, basically.
Yeah. The whole idea of an antitrust is that there is a monopoly that they can't break through.
Yeah.
And if you look at it from what you're saying, if they can't get paid what is fair compensation for which the schools or these conferences are making a whole bunch of money, that this is where the antitrust lawsuit, that there's a monopoly on this money from the conferences, and they're not getting any representation or say But I just wanted to throw that out there for the average person who maybe is wondering why are they so in trouble from these lawsuits. The other thing is I don't know that the average person understands when we talk about NIL, and this is where I think it's going to be easiest for the average person to see the difference between where maybe the Big Two and the other conferences will be, is that when these bigger conferences with more money, they will sign NIL deals with their own players, with their own students. This isn't to say the NIL money will funnel through the school, because that other public NIL money will still be all active outside the universities. And as you just said, there's no way to put that genie back in the bottle. It's out there. Mm-hmm. But the universities will be able to sign an NIL deal. You play for us. We're going to pay you for your image so we can put you on our football poster or our basketball poster. So there'll be NIL deals outside the university, but there'll be NIL deals inside the university.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Yeah, and that's where the difference is going to start. This is where the Big Ten and the SEC are going to be able to start to separate themselves when they have more money to do this for their players.
Yes.
That those in-tier NIL deals will just naturally be bigger.
Yes.
I mean, they just will.
Yes. And but even within the conferences,
and it'll probably be organized by there'll be conference rules.
No. But those NIL deals, there will be a differential. Big one. Let's just take Ohio State versus Minnesota, okay?
Oh, sure.
Ohio State's going to crush Minnesota with NIL deals, okay? It's going to be a differentiating factor. But there's also going to be another piece to this, Bobby. I believe, I had a long conversation with somebody today. It's that media money, the Big Ten media money. They're going to take a certain percentage of that. That's going to go to the student athletes. So a Ohio State Buckeye left tackle is probably going to get the same amount of money as the Minnesota Golden Gopher left tackle when it comes to that pot of money, that media money.
Sure.
And that is what they're going to try to figure out between the SEC and the Big Ten, because that pot of money is going to be bigger than the other conferences because they have more media money. But the NIL money, the Buckeyes right tackle, or whatever.
The exterior NIL money and the interior NIL money.
Yes, is going to crush Minnesota and almost everybody else in the Big Ten. And that's going to satisfy the Buckeyes. That's going to satisfy Minnesota because they have no other choice. But at least they're getting that media money that's going to help them differentiate between Minnesota and Boston College, for example.
Here's another problem that is actually happening now, like right now, and I'm seeing it. I don't know how it's going to be figured out, but the Iowa Hawkeyes have not been super active in the NIL this off season for football. Why? Because they have too many players, and they had a lot of guys were offered NIL money to come back, and they're actually over scholarship.
Yeah.
And I think team limits for players is going to get very interesting here because scholarships don't matter as much as the NIL money, and you could have 20 players being paid NIL money, but they're technically walk-ons by scholarship. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. Yep.
And so how do you limit team sizes? I think that becomes a very interesting question.
Yeah.
I mean, there's ways to do it, but I think it has to get figured out. I mean, there are ways to do it, but that part also has to get figured out. And that's where your Minnesota Golden Gophers will have a chance, because if you figure that limiting number of scholarships or players on a team well, then the other team can only take so many players.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe all 80 of their players are really good, but that's all they can take.
Yes. And that's what it is now. There's 85, right? So
yeah,
85 scholarship players. So
and the field only holds 11 at a time.
Yeah, and it's also with staff. The Big Ten and the SEC are going to figure out what size of their football staff, the size of their baseball staff.
Yeah.
SEC might have bigger baseball staffs, but they're going to figure that out. They're going to figure out a lot among the two of them. It doesn't have authority, all this stuff, but then they're going to bring the ACC and the Big 12 in eventually in those advisory groups. But I think they just want to start with some sort of consensus and then branch it out and see if they can hold it together.
Yeah, but they're going to completely have to figure out player limits on these teams regardless of scholarship. That's a major problem sitting right in front of us right now.
Yes, sir.
And you don't hear anybody really talking about that one. But and football is one thing. Imagine basketball, where you could easily have 20 guys.
Yeah.
On NIL money at a place like Duke or North Carolina, you could have 20 guys being paid for just so they're not playing for somebody else. That's the stuff. I didn't really have, like I say, I just figured it's good to ask you questions about some of these things for somebody who's just getting onto your show for the first time.
Yeah. No, great call, Bobby. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, but, great show, Greg. I mean, what you really hear, that little squealing sound you hear, is rubber meeting the road.
Yes. Because of these lawsuits. They got to stop them.
Yeah. And soon.
Yes. Yep.
Because some of these lawsuits, like you say, if you get a whole bunch of players that are suing for backwards, you're talking about billions of dollars.
Yes. Yep.
Billions of dollars. And so, no, and that's where Tony Petitti, and I wonder, this is where conference leadership is going to be so important. The Big Ten, to this point, has a history of kind of innovative thinking, with the Big Ten Network first so many years ago, and then now looking to make a national conference, not just a regional conference. I just wonder if Sankey is a guy looking for somebody else to save him in this. That's not. You're going to have to be way more proactive than that interiorly. Way more proactive than that interiorly.
Yeah.
Conference leadership is going to make all the difference in this, at least in the short term, especially if it's going that fast. In the short, you're going to notice real quick who are the smart conference leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know about Tony Petitti. Good or bad. I agree with what he did in the Michigan Wolverines case. I thought he acted in a quick manner. I thought he went about as much as he could on that. But other than that, we're going to find out a lot about Tony Petitti here in the next 6 months. But in regards to Sankey, man, he's not a reformist at heart. So we'll see what happens.
Well, reform doesn't benefit his conference.
No, it doesn't. Yep. Yes. Correct.
And you're also dealing with the South that cares a lot more about tradition than it cares about innovation, just as a cultural.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with maintaining culture and those things, but Yeah, no. Well, I have to think Petiti was brought in for this. I have to think in his interviews this came up. I hope so.
Yeah.
Because this was already underway a year ago.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Just think where we were last year, Greg.
I can't even remember
last
year.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just no, we were last year. We were beginning the rumblings of Colorado and Pac-10, and coming out of the fall, where Oregon and Washington couldn't happen because of Kevin Warren.
Yeah.
Doesn't that seem like a million years ago?
Yeah, I think it was. If you go back in my YouTube channel, I think it was February 9th or somewhere around there. I did a live show. That's in the title of the live show was "Don't Panic, Pac-12. Don't panic." Then on February 24th, I said, the PATC Imaginary Sportsbook has just listed the Big 12 as the favorite to poach the Pac-12, and and that's how it was the whole time. February 24th. So yeah, it's almost a year. Wow. And then of course it happened on Colorado, July 27th. You're right. Jeez, that was just a year ago.
Just a year ago, Greg.
Yeah.
That's when I started catching on to you. It was last spring in the middle of all of that. And actually, I think no, that's not true. I first caught on to you right around the USC-UCLA thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of other people did too.
Yeah.
But I've been following realignment since Nebraska came into the Big Ten. It's just always been like side hobby passion.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's true for a lot of other people, but no things. But that's just an example, Greg, how fast things are changing.
Yes, and it's and it also makes me very, very wary of the Florida State versus ACC situation, where we've been told the ACC is dug in and all this stuff, but everything seems to happen quicker than prognosticators say. Like it happens. There's a quickening to this. There's a quickening.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
What JD was saying about some of the rumors about ACC mishandling behind the scenes, I just bumped into something the other day that kind of hinted at some of those. If 1/3 of those rumors are true that I bumped into the other day, the ACC is terrified.
Yeah.
They cannot let any of that go public. They can't. They just can't. If they do, that conference could be shaken to its core within a week. And that's why, I mean, Florida State could be out of the ACC by the summer, and it's not because that's where we thought we would be. That's just what could happen.
Yes.
If everything happens down a certain path, and I would wager that that's why Clemson is keeping their powder dry. Because this has become much more devastating to the ACC than they thought it was going to. And why throw your hat in the ring when things are, I mean, if the thing falls over before you do, you could be one of those who gets out after it falls over. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. I'm just saying, and I don't know if those rumors that I heard the other day are true. But if 1/3 of them are true,
can you give us one? Can you give us one rumor? Do you have time?
Well, you're talking about. I mean, I heard rumor, and then no, I'm saying it. So this is true rumor mill. I mean, it's about really bad mishandling when the ACC deal was stuck that favored other schools behind the scenes while keeping a face of treating them all equally, shoving money at having favorite schools that got favors not in the contract.
Okay.
I mean, really nasty, really bad. The kind of thing that would shake the conference to its core. yeah, I mean, if you, like I said, I always often tell people rumor and small children is where I get my best information. Those are my, but, and so don't take it from me that that's what did happen or will come out or anything. But like I say, those are some of the rumors going around. And if 1/3 of what I heard, that was kind of very broad kind of generalization of what I heard. If 1/3 of what I heard was true, like I say, the ACC is terrified. And that's why they're desperate to have this thing silenced. And if I was the ACC, I would seriously consider, say, you know what, pay the exit fee, you're out, and we go to these winter meetings, we double or triple the exit fee, and just approach it from that way.
Interesting.
If you really wanted to keep all this quiet, let Florida stay out for part of it is because consent, and this is again just listening to different podcast things by lawyers who are not connected with any of this. Generally speaking, that the exit fee has teeth, and the grant of rights penalty money does not.
Yeah.
I think you've probably heard similar things too. Not to say they can't use it as leverage for bargaining and all that stuff. If I'm the ACC going into these winter meetings, tell Florida State, look, if you take the exit fee right now, just go. And the first thing on the docket when we do the winter meetings, we're doubling or tripling the exit fee. If I'm the ACC, that's the easiest, most direct way to handle this. And my guess is you have enough schools that depend on the ACC's existence that they could outvote anybody who'd vote against that.
Could be. But then again, you have the old ESPN could walk away from their media deal.
Sure, but the ACC's got no control over that.
Yep, that's true. Yep.
They can control this. They can't control that.
Yep. Control what you can control.
You do what you can control, and you stop the bleeding, and then see what happens.
Yep.
And you can already see that Florida State's prepared to go to scorched earth, and they're going to do this like a drip campaign. Here's a bad piece of information. Here's a bad piece of like every month you're going to get another bombshell. That's a bloodletting. You can stop it by just saying, you know what, for the $120 million, I bet Florida State would take that and run. Go, and then we're going to double or triple our exit fee rights, and that should keep most of our other schools in for now, and it just stops the bleeding.
Yep. We'll see.
I mean,
the winning meeting.
We'll see. But like I say, at the ACC, if what I've heard is true, they haven't had the best leadership either.
Yeah. The winning meeting's February 15th. So it's closing in. 13 days
It's closing.
away.
That's those are just my random thoughts, Greg. Those are just musings on a Friday night.
Beautiful.
But your show is great. I hope people appreciate what they've got in you, Greg.
Thank you, Bobby. I appreciate it. Very kind words. Thank you, sir.
God bless.
I love your calls. Calls again. God bless you, sir.
Yep.
All right. Beautiful call once again by Bobby. I think we're going to go and wrap it up. I know a lot of different programs are going live right now. We've been on the air for over 2 hours. I want to thank you all for joining us. Great phone calls. Thank you for the donations, for the gift memberships. Again, if you're new to the show, please subscribe to the show. Have your notifications on, smash the like button, and if you want to become an Early Peak member, hit the join button. Early Peak Cloak and Dagger member, just hit the join button. And always, as always, keep your head on a swivel. There's so much going on. Some of it is complete silence, like Clemson. We're talking, they're not talking to anybody. Keep your head on a swivel. We'll see what Clemson does here. Are they going to stay silent? Are they not going to say a word until the ACC winter meetings? Until next time, from all of us at PATC to all of you, please, you all take great care of each other. Thank you so very much.